The sermon this morning is including a reading from Poem of the Man God, Volume 2, and this is Jesus teaching in a synagogue at Nazareth on the Sabbath. And he says, "Listen, people of Nazareth, you already know the moral of the apologue against Abimelech, as you have been instructed by the head of your synagogue, who in his days was instructed by a rabbi, who had learned from another rabbi, and so on for ages, always with the same method and the same conclusions." He's referencing a story from the Old Testament. I believe it's in the book of Judges. And so it's not that important what the story is, but just so you know. "But you will hear a different moral from me, and I ask you to make use of your intelligence, and not to be like the ropes of a well pulley, which, until they are worn out, run from the pulley down to the water, and then from the water back up to the pulley, without ever changing. Man is not a rope or a mechanical device. Man has been gifted with intelligence and must make use of it on his own behalf, according to the needs and the circumstances. Because if the letter of the word is eternal, circumstances change. Those are poor masters who do not want the trouble or the satisfaction of extracting each time new teachings. That is the spirit that the ancient wise words always contain. They will be like echoes which can repeat, even dozens of times, the same word, without ever adding one word of their own. Mankind, the forest in fact, where all kinds of trees, shrubs, and herbs are gathered, represent mankind, feels the need to be led by someone who would take upon himself all the glory and even greater burden of authority and responsibility for the happiness or unhappiness of his subjects. Someone who would be responsible to the subjects, to the neighboring countries, and to God. Because it is true that crowns and social preeminence, whichever they may be, are granted by men, but they are allowed by God, without whose condescension no human power can be imposed, which explains the sudden unimaginable changes in dynasties, which were considered everlasting, and of powers which seemed untouchable, and which, when they overstepped the limit in punishing or trying people, were overthrown by the same people with God's permission, and became nothing but dust. I said, people feel the need to elect someone who will take upon himself all responsibilities towards his subjects, towards neighboring nations, and towards God. God's justice is relentless. God's justice is relentless because it is not affected by any pressure whatsoever. Neither is it subject to the change of humor or opinion, as men too often are. And above all, it is not subject to wrong judgment. Those, therefore, who are elected leaders of peoples and makers of history ought to act with the heroic justice of saints in order not to become ill-famed in future centuries. But let us get back to Abimelech's apologue. So the trees wanted to have a king, and they went to the olive tree. But the latter, being a sacred tree and consecrated to supernatural use because of its oil that burns in front of the Lord and its predominant element in tithes and sacrifices, the olive tree replies, "How could I fail my holy supernatural vocation to degrade myself in worldly matters?" Oh, how gentle was the reply of the olive tree. Why is it not learned and repeated by all those whom God elects to a holy mission, at least by those? Because in actual fact, it should be pronounced by every man as a reply to the suggestion of the demon, because every person is a ruler and a child of God, gifted with a soul, which makes them a regal divine child called to a supernatural destiny. The soul is an altar and a house, the altar of God, the house where the Heavenly Father descends to receive the love and reverence of His Son and subject. Everyone has a soul, and as each soul is an altar, every one is thereby a priest, a guardian of the altar. And in Leviticus it is written, "The priest shall not profane himself." Man, therefore, ought to reply to the temptations of the demon, of the world, and of the flesh. Can I stop being spiritual and busy myself with material, sinful matters? The story, I looked up a little bit about the story, and it just has to do with, it's like a fable where the trees are seeking a leader. And they're going around to the olive tree and the fig tree and the shrubs and the thorns, and they're asking each one of them, will they be the king of the trees? It's a testament to the fact that we are seeking leadership. And that's normal. If you look around the world, countries have leaders. The challenge that we face here is that we are looking to transcend the worldly patterns of leadership. And we're looking to respond to something else. Because it's Mother's Day, I wanted to consider Mother's Day as part of the message this morning, and what came to me in meditation was the responsibility of it. But I want to continually reframe the term responsibility so that it doesn't create a heavy feeling inside of you. The initial etymology of the word respond is quite interesting. The re is a prefix which means back, and the verb is a Latin verb spondere, which means to pledge. Now it takes a little bit of like, wait, what is that all about? To pledge back. Well, a pledge is like a promise, and to respond means, in a sense, to make a pledge back to, you could say, that which was given to you. So if you're going to be responsible as a mother, then that means the gift of the child and the child's soul that has been given to you is a pretty big responsibility. You pledge to raise that child and to give that child love and to be with them, at least for 18 years until they probably launch onto their own. An environment of love to teach them, to discipline them, to connect them with God as much as they are willing and able. Hopefully that is the pledge of a mother. For some reason we have a bit of a convoluted concept about responsibility. That is a worldly attitude. The olive tree has a very cool response. He's like, how can I, basically, in my language, he would say, how is it that you want me to relinquish my spiritual obligations and responsibilities in order to be your worldly king? That would just be a degrading choice on my part. And Jesus calls it a very gentle response. And then he goes on to speak about how you have a soul, and that soul was given to you, and probably for the first 15, 18, 20, maybe even 30 years, there's not a lot of pressure on you to respond back. But at some point, the promise is that you will respond to this presence within. In the beginning, it's a responsibility to your soul. A responsibility to learn and recognize how your soul communicates to you. It's very different than how your mind communicates to you. The vehicle of mind is a tool by which the soul communicates to you. It's one of them. So that when you're getting clear thoughts that feel like these are my true thoughts, then they will come through your mind. But also your mind can allow all sorts of other weird thoughts to come in. If you become consumed with worldly matters, then your mind becomes a channel for those kind of thoughts. So you have to be able to discern the difference. Your soul will often communicate through intuition. There'll be a sense of a deep feeling. And that feeling, while you can't explain it, and your mind may be struggling to try to make sense of it, you can't deny that it is something that needs to be paid attention to. Your heart also can be the channel for the soul to communicate to you. Have you made the pledge to give back to your soul? Meaning, the will in you, the decision maker in you, who has to decide, do I follow the callings of my mind when they are obsessed with worldly matters and frustrations and irritations and whatever sensual pleasures that I want to distract myself with? Or do I choose to respond to the pressures of my soul, which seek to live a meaningful life, create an environment of love, and at some point will begin to go Where is the source? Who is my true king? And then you generally will find a place like this, which is seeking to be a channel for the path of initiation towards self-realization, and you'll begin to be taught that there is another part in you that you have to be responsible for. Well, better language is you could choose to be responsible to, which is the self within, sometimes known as the God self or known as the Christ. Responsibility to the Christ is, I believe, the highest calling. You have to get that part connected in order that you could then carry on with a life that is meaningful. Once that connection is established, you have to develop it, you have to surrender to it, you have to recognize what is my place as soul in relationship to the self within. I think this is the highest calling. I mean, I believe that, and I believe that anywhere that you go that teaches about the path is going to be imperfect to a certain degree, just as this place is, just as I am. However, the path is perfect. So the people who strive to help you on it are on the path as you are on the path. Recently, it's been a few months, I have felt the stirring in my soul to make some changes for myself. And at the same time, the pressures of, we have a community here, and I love this community. So I took my time until I was able to give myself some space away, and I was meditating on it, and then I was called to respond to what God was telling me, which has to do with every soul, no matter where you're at on the path, is going to be called to different things. So the path is unshaken, whether or not I'm here or not. Without me here, it gives everyone an opportunity to go, am I on the path, or do I just like this community? Am I really committed to what I've been learning here, which is I'm aware of myself as a soul, and I must seek the Christ within. And then I find the Christ within. In the Gospel of Thomas it says, first I must seek, and when I find I will be confounded, and then afterwards I will find great joy. So there's a period of disruption when you begin to find that this is true, that there is Christ within, and the presence of the God Self is calling you to a higher level of functioning. Very disruptive. Many people struggle with that because you can't see what you're going to become next. And there's times when, I love that line in there which says, God's judgment is relentless. God is not concerned with sometimes how we struggle and how we resist these things. You can imagine, let's say you got to take your child to school for the first time, and they go, I don't want to go to school, I'm never going to go to school, school's mean. And you're like, everybody goes to school. Like, you have the sight to be able to go, like, you're going to get used to it. So I'm not going to give in to your screaming tantrum just because you're scared, or I'm going to sit there and listen, well, what exactly is it? But I don't know, I don't want to go. Well, you have to go. It's just life. And school is a good thing. So you're not going to give in to that. And that's a lot of times, I think, what derails people is that we throw a tantrum not realizing that God is trying to elevate us to something better. It's hard as adults because our tantrum looks very different. When kids throw a tantrum, it's pretty obvious. When we throw a tantrum, it's very sneaky, actually. So it can be disguised as many things. I can imagine, a really, really great, one of the world-class, for example, gymnastics teams. And imagine that the coach is speaking to a room full of, 30, high school freshmen, boys and girls who are aspiring to be on this team. And probably what he would realistically say is it's going to be incredibly difficult because in order to make this team, you have to demonstrate that you will give everything. Every aspect of yourself. The training will be grueling. And the feelings that you'll have to go through will be really, really hard. However, the triumph of being on the team is a beautiful thing. To know that you overcame those parts of you that resisted because it was difficult. Same thing could be somebody speaking to a graduating class, for example, at Harvard Business School. They would probably say, some of you will do amazing, great things. Others of you will give up because you will not have the stamina that you need to in times of adversity. I don't wish any of that on you, we might say. However, we look at the statistics, and this is just how it plays out. The path is this way. It's this high caliber team, for lack of a better word, where everybody is welcome, actually. Everybody's welcome to go for it. But the adversity that you will experience and the pull of people going like, what's the point? Why are you working so hard at this? It has to be you responding to the pressure inside of you. The pressure of the soul going like, I must fulfill my meaningful purpose. And the God in you going like, listen to me. I am the king. And I will love you, O soul within. And you will be my subject, and I will give you an opportunity to do something meaningful on this earth. We have to be torn away from those old ideas of thinking and patterns, and it's very difficult. And people will at some point veer off the path and just, camp out for a bit and go, let me just settle into this new level where I'm at. I don't want to, there's no rush, and I'm okay with that. Really I am. There is no rush. But for those who go like, I don't want to take a break because there's momentum, or for those who hit a snag and go like, everything was going okay, but then nobody answered my prayer, and so how do I continue now? I can tell you many times I have felt that way, that my prayer was not answered. And over time, I realized that maybe my prayer is not answered today in the way that I wanted, and maybe I have to do more, and maybe I have to surrender my idea, and I don't know exactly. What's important? My connection to God is important. Where I'm living and who I'm with is secondary to that. And when you really get that, then you'll be free in a way that you might not be free yet. And you'll begin to trust that you go for things with all your heart, but when you hit a wall, you go, I guess I have to turn one way or the other. And hopefully I can get some direction. Should I turn to the right or should I turn to the left? And maybe once in a while, the self within will say, no, I want you to scale this wall. Well, what does that mean? It's all metaphorical anyway. Well, I don't know what it means, but I might have to sit there and I might have to ponder, well, what would that mean to scale over this? Maybe I have to back off and wait, or I have to actually fight a little bit, or who knows what it is. But trust me that there is incredible liberation in making this pledge to give your soul back to the presence of God within and seek to live that way. It is, I really believe it's the secret of life. And like Jesus said, man has been given intelligence. We're not here to just read a scripture and go like, just like every other time I taught this passage, this is what it means. End of class, have a nice night. We don't do it like that. We go, tonight we read this parable and we don't know what it means. Yes, I have some ideas based on what we talked about last time. But he's saying that the Spirit has life. And are you willing to sit there and work harder to draw out the meaning that's in the teaching today? In the same way that you can't go like, well, all my life I've done this, and so here comes another situation, I guess I'll just do this. Circumstances are different now. And so whatever situation you face, you have to start meditating on, well, what are the circumstances now? And am I working harder to respond to the calling of my soul, to respond to the calling of God within? Am I willing to do that work with the intelligence that I have been given? Or am I falling back into a pool of misery and pity because it's not exactly, what I thought? I mean, these people who get into whatever, the Russian gymnastics team, or these people who really come up with some world-altering new business, I don't think anybody's story is going to be a cakewalk. These are going to be people who just dedicated themselves and they were driven by some sort of drive inside that is hard to explain. I really believe it's in there in every person. It's just what it is that motivates you to be driven in that way.